With the decks cleared on Silver Surfer, Jim Starland returned to bring back his signature character, and this time against the Silver Surfer. As discussed last time, the Surfer was used sparingly at Stan's request, so the two of them had never faced off. Now, however, the Surfer would find in Thanos an adversary unlike any he's ever faced. It all begins with the Surfer choosing a desolate world to land upon, rest and sleep. As he dreams, he spots a strange structure nearby, and inside, a pair of minions carrying a chest, lamenting how the mistress has been in a state since the In-Betweener dared to summon and compel her during that business with the elders. The mistress is, of course, Death herself, and she has summoned this crate because contained within is the soul of the one who most honored her in life, Thanos. His spectral form is ready to serve her again, and it's explained why she needs him. While it's open to interpretation, it's implied that the encounter between the In-Betweener has awakened in her a concern that there is an imbalance in the universe between life and death, an imbalance that will lead ultimately to doom. Thanos is to correct this imbalance, and the only one who may impede his efforts is, of course, the Silver Surfer. Hence why he's allowed to see all this in his dream. He's blasted out of the place by Thanos' power, and discovers multitudes on this barren planet now, looking to a volcano where a woman prepares to sacrifice an infant to it. The Silver Surfer saves the child only for it to grow hostile, swell, and attempt to smother him within itself, until he destroys it. When he awakens, he discovers it was more than a dream, for Thanos has arrived, leading us into issue 35. The issue begins with Thanos choosing to reason with the Surfer rather than attack him, an important point that shows where others fail with the character. We'll get into that more at the end. What importantly illustrates this is, as he's trying to explain the great imbalance, he teleports himself and the Surfer away with his space throne. The Surfer presumes that this is an attempt to deny him his board and blasts Thanos for that. The annoyed Thanos merely asks if he's through. Far more than showing his power, it shows his temperament. It's not that Thanos cannot become angry or enraged, but that he is not some cosmic Doctor Doom. He goes on with explaining the imbalance. That is, one example, the population of Earth has grown so large that more than half of all humans who have ever lived are alive right now. In the MCU, Thanos was not motivated by a love for death, but rather a concern that there was too many living beings and not enough universe to support them all, and that left unchecked there would only be death. That concept is actually drawn from this issue, as Thanos uses it to explain why death feels that there is an imbalance. He shows excessive refuse, overcrowding, pollution, stockpiled hazardous waste, all signs where it's going to end, self-destruction. The allegory of the dream with the child was that if the Surfer saved the people that Thanos would sacrifice, they would become a cancer, out of control until only slaughter could end it. This isn't the purging that the old Thanos had done by annihilating stars, it is to restore balance to the system. He further illustrates this with the planet Solaria, where the seemingly innocent creatures are destined to become warrior cannibals if they are allowed to continue multiplying unchecked as they are now, with no natural predators to keep their numbers down. Mistress Death wants this stopped because the inevitable end of it all is swinging from too much life to too much death, once the systems can no longer support the numbers. And Thanos notes that the Silver Surfer has already helped him take the first step in his goal, to kill 50% of the population of the universe. Because when he was on Earth, microbes were picked up on his body, microbes that survived the journey between planets due to teleportation rather than traveling through the cosmic ray-filled vacuum of space. Sure enough, the Solarians have been devastated by plague that the Surfer unwittingly caused. Yet Thanos notes will now have a more sustainable population once the Surfer cures them. This also gives the Surfer something to keep busy with while Thanos considers the task before him, unaware that Kronos has heard of Thanos' return, and so restores Drax the Destroyer back to life, to once again have someone to face Thanos. It's a wonderful return for the character, and the use of 2 issues like this allows it to proceed at a relaxed pace. Readers can really sense that this character is not so simple a villain as might be expected. Yes, he's powerful, but his personality is different than so many other villains, and his service to death has taken on a more complex aspect as well. While the rebirth of Captain Marvel would undermine the character's story, this rebirth of Thanos shows that great opportunities for stories are now being unlocked. His return is not a cheap trick that undoes a past end, but emerges with purpose and opportunities for growth. This leads us to a case of, clear lack of communication. The Impossible Man. A one-off character that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby came up with in the first year of the Fantastic Four. The character was brought back in issue 175 and stuck around until 195 before getting dumped again. After that, he was largely a forgotten character, as he was a living cartoon character essentially, and that has limited possibilities for a superhero comic book. To give you an idea of how rarely he showed up, he last appeared in Fantastic Four about the same time that Thanos died, and Thanos put in almost as many appearances as the Impossible Man, despite being dead. It was thus a problem that when Jim Starland felt he needed a lighthearted comedy issue after the seriousness of what had just happened, and Jim Valentino needed to come up with some filler between the end of Steve Englehart's run and Starland's start, that both of them hit upon the same idea of using the Impossible Man. Having him 3 issues apart is a bit much. In issue 36, Surfer returns to Earth to learn about Thanos from the Avengers, allowing for a retelling of the events from comic stories that were likely older than many of the people reading them. They told about the Cosmic Cube, Warlock, and the Soul Gems. The second half, then, is the Impossible Man screwing with him, so that he learns the lessons to lighten up. This will work a lot better if you don't read the Valentino filler books, as a little Impossible Man goes a long way. Issue 37 begins with the Surfer trying to pick up where Thanos had gone since their parting, noting that his teleportation makes tracking far more difficult than it normally would be. He works at trying to trace it, but even when he finds a means to do so, Thanos has thought to obfuscate his meager tracks on the off chance that he could be followed. With the trail going cold, Surfer heads to Titan to speak to Mentor, a move that Captain America had recommended, and Mentor talks about the evil that Thanos did. First, at age 10, he murdered his own mother, but no one suspected it. Then, 8 years later, a girl, after doing something described only as ghastly, and he was forced to flee Titan. For the next 80 years, Thanos went from an exile to a force to be reckoned with, growing in not just experience, but in personal power. But the reflections are interrupted by the arrival of Drax the Destroyer, demanding to know where Thanos is. The problem is that he's not quite the Drax from before. Moondragon, you'll remember, killed him by destroying his very mind, and so even though he's been bodily restored, his mind still isn't altogether there. He knows he needs to find Thanos, but he can't. He only knows that Surfer ran into him recently, and so he won't leave him alone. Since he's an impossible companion to deal with, Surfer tries various means of force to get rid of him before considering the argument of Impossible Man, that if he's going to beat Thanos, he needs to lighten up. This leads to a less frustrating solution. He tells Drax that they can look at Earth information machines to try to find out where Thanos is, though it might take him some time. So he plunks Drax down in front of a television to watch I Love Lucy, and then eventually leaves. Issue 38 is when Thanos returns to his old ship and confronts Nebula. Well, the crew is overjoyed, having long awaited his return from death, while Nebula naturally assumes this is just a deception, like the one when they were fighting the Skrulls. Thanos takes down her number 1 henchman, Gyatar, a huge alien, and then makes his displeasure known for claiming to be his granddaughter by setting her on fire. Despite the assumption this would be fatal, she survives, and one loyal crew member takes her somewhere to hide and recover. This could easily all be dismissed as Starland peeing in a circle to mark his territory. Someone stepped in and presumed to claim something about his character, and he's issuing a harsh rebuke. It's not uncommon. John Byrne was unhappy that Dr. Doom didn't respond after Arcade struck a match on his armor, and so revealed it to be a Doombot over in the pages of Fantastic Four, and had it destroyed by Doom for tolerating such indignity, to give but one of many examples. However, as we'll see, Starland is actually playing a much longer game here, hence making clear that, although horribly burned, Nebula lives to continue in the story. Thanos gives instructions to his crew, though we don't know what, but is summoned back to Death's realm by his master. She doesn't speak directly to him, but rather the rat minion conveys her displeasure that he has yet to begin his campaign to eliminate half the universe. But Thanos says that this must be carefully plotted. After all, his previous two failings in his grand plans happened because the threat he posed compelled others to unite in common cause against him. If he attempted to begin a campaign of mass slaughter across the universe, it would quickly draw an even worse alliance against him. No, he has plans, the first of which is to deal with the Silver Surfer, the one who might interfere with his work, and Thanos recognizes that direct physical confrontation with him could backfire. What he needs isn't to destroy the Surfer, after all. He just needs to keep him from getting in the way, to get him distracted, and he pulls this off with a clever 1-2 punch. He formulated this plan by looking into the Infinity Well, which can reveal all if you know what you're looking for. So he attracts the attention of the Silver Surfer once he's ready, and tells him that they should finally settle things on a technologically advanced but delicately balanced world, one that could easily be destroyed if Thanos threw things out of balance, ironically enough, considering this is Thanos. Thanos lures the Surfer into the conduits below the surface and repeatedly attacks him and disappears, so that Surfer's only hope is to attack quickly while he has the chance. So he doesn't notice when he finally tracks Thanos down that Thanos is confused as to where he is and sheds tears as he silently pleads for mercy before being blasted by the Surfer. It was only intended to disable the Space Throne, but the explosion has reduced Thanos to a skeleton, and the Surfer is disappointed this had to end in death, and collects the body to return it to Titan. He doesn't realize that Thanos had his crew turn Gyatar, that alien henchman, into a duplicate of him. He had the build, after all, for it, and placed on a duplicate of his Space Throne to make Silver Surfer think that he was now dead. Now that is just the first half of the plan, though, to keep the Surfer out of his business. But first, a detour into Silver Surfer Annual number 3. Lifeform was a crossover event of that summer, but rather than being a team-up book, it tracked a single story as 4 different heroes each had to deal with it as things got worse and worse, starting with the Punisher, then going to Daredevil, then to the Hulk, and now to finish it up, the Silver Surfer. The details of this are largely unimportant for our purposes. Surfer returns to Earth to inform the Avengers that he killed Thanos, and on the way back he speaks to Reed Richards, who is on his way to deal with that lifeform problem. With all that Reed has done for him, Surfer naturally agrees to help him, confronting the huge blob monster thing that the lifeform has now become, and eventually forcing him to dump the creature on a planet once consumed by Galactus, a safe place for him to cut loose and destroy it. That's when the human who originally was infected with the virus finally can momentarily speak, pleading with the Surfer to destroy this thing while he can, because there's no way to separate him from it. His body is now this thing, controlled by the monstrous life form, and that creates a dilemma for the Surfer. He will not take an innocent life, even one begging him to do so, because that is anathema to his being. Yet he wonders if being a righteous man makes him a worse monster, to leave someone to suffer when he could end it for them. The irony is that as he flies off, the Silver Surfer is unaware that the Thanos he killed was, in fact, a completely innocent being. There's a second part to the annual that is important, but we will take that and the Surfer story and put them to one side, as we see what Thanos is getting up to in his plan to eliminate half the population of the universe. This happens in the two-part miniseries Thanos Quest, which begins with him gazing again into the Infinity Well, where he's learned things that help him shape the plan. When questioned on this, Thanos says that while the great power his new body has is impressive, what will allow this task to be achieved in a reasonable time frame would be the 6 soul gems. He says they are capable of so much more than he'd thought, given how little experience there was with them. Warlock certainly showed that using them was a lot of on-the-job learning experience that didn't always end well. But the Infinity Well has shown him what they are capable of, and together they could achieve the rebalance that Death wants. Sensing her hesitation, Thanos knows that the first person he intends to dupe is none other than the In-Betweener. Well, after what he did to Death, she's all in favor of anything that would punish him, and gives the plan her blessing. Well, you know what I mean. As you can no doubt glean, the gems are still with the people who had them the last time that we saw them, when the In-Betweener tried to destroy Galactus, and thus he still has Warlock's soul gem. With his space throne, Thanos can pass through dimensions and into the Nexus of Realities, where Lord Chaos and Master Order have imprisoned the In-Betweener. Thanos says that he's here to free the In-Betweener because the only way to escape from Death's service is to have another patron to protect him from her wrath. The In-Betweener agrees, which is a complete lie. He has no need for a servant or any interest in paying a debt. All he wants to do is get out of this prison. So after they break him out, he tries to destroy Thanos. Emphasis on tries. But he utterly fails because he doesn't realize that his power cannot work here, where the forces are so perfectly balanced that he cannot draw on his special ability to find opposites. Thanos takes the soul gem and leaves the In-Betweener to the harsh punishment that his masters will no doubt inflict on him for his escape. With the first gem his, Thanos goes on to the Champion, who has the power gem. As was the case previously, the use of the gem is not to its full potential. He's tapping into it on a subconscious level, enhancing his considerable might to obscene proportions. In fact, Thanos goads him into attacking so hard he destroys the planet. As he hangs there in space, Thanos rains on his parade, pointing out that all he's done is destroyed the very prize they were fighting over and managed to strand himself. In the end, the Champion is willing to surrender his soul gem for a ride to another inhabited planet. Given the fact that only the first gem actually involves the soul, Thanos starts referring to them not as soul gems, but infinity gems, a reflection of the power that they unlock. His next stop then is the Gardener, who is actually quite reasonable and reflects a disinclination towards the power-hungry antics of his fellows. Now we know that he'd already had a soul gem when he worked with them, so his remark about joining them to regain it is a contradiction, but it could easily be inferred that they were going to use his soul gem with or without his involvement, so by working with them, he'd at least retain it. Regardless, his conflict with Thanos is only because neither can give up on having the gem. Thanos wins, though not through physical confrontation. Rather, he uses the power gem that he's already had to amp up the one that the Gardener has, which controls time. His ability to have a magnificent garden is the result of manipulating their life cycles to achieve his aesthetic ends. Now, however, Thanos has used that against him and left him free to take it from him, which brings his total to 3. Issue 2 continues with the next Elder with a soul gem, the Collector. Thanos contacts the Collector to discuss trading something of great value for his gem. An irony, given that the Collector claimed that he started his collection mania to one day thwart Thanos. He says he'll consider it if it's something truly worthwhile. But in the meantime, Thanos has to meet the next Elder, the Runner, who proceeds to smash up his space throne. He demands to know why Thanos is on this quest, so Thanos explains the nature of the gems. They were actually once a single sentient being that gave up its existence, and these are the manifestations of its impossibly great power. If Thanos were to possess all the gems, he'd gain such might that he could sit at Death's side as an equal. However, he's only explaining this to buy time, as that's the weapon he's using, the time gem, to accelerate the runner's age so that even his immortality can't stop him becoming helplessly old and no threat. The gem that he plucks from the runner is the space gem, which allows him to be faster than he'd ever imagined he could be because he was subconsciously teleporting himself to his destination. And it's good that Thanos has it now. For Thanos, I mean, as he now has it as a way to get around now that his space throne is destroyed. The next part of his plan is to reverse the process on the runner, turning him from an old man into an infant. And then he offers that to the Collector in exchange for his Infinity Gem. But the Collector has been watching Thanos and agrees to this trade only if it also comes with a pledge not to interfere with him. With that, Thanos gains the Reality Gem, and the runner is summarily restored to his rightful age, making it a rather poor bargain. That leaves only the Grand Master, the possessor of the Mind Gem. He was, of course, the one who orchestrated the Elder's various plots, and it should be clear that of all of them, he's the one who craves the power that Thanos reveals that the Infinity Gems possess the most. Indeed, when the Collector had realized what the Reality Gem could do, he was terrified that it had been in his possession all this time. The Grand Master, of course, has shown an ambition that says that he is prepared to face anything in order to have such power. Except, unable to resist his nature, he must gain them from Thanos in a game. Even a game that he is prepared to cheat at to win. But it still must be through a game. Unfortunate for him, because Thanos guessed that he would try something like this, and guessed that he might cheat, and so used a robot in his stead, leaving him free to thwart the trap and eliminate the Grand Master, acquiring the last of the 6 Infinity Gems. After explaining their function to the reader, the breadth of the power they provide, Thanos rightly asserts that this far exceeds what even the Cosmic Cube had granted him. Thus his scheme is fulfilled. He returns to Mistress Death to now sit at her side as an equal, as someone worthy of her. But he's too clever for his own good. Death disapproves, but rather than expressing it, illustrates it by making clear whatever he desires from her is granted, solely because he demands it of her, not because it is being freely given. Thanos walks away, quietly distraught that he has achieved total power. He could even make her be all that he wishes she would be, to act as he wished she would. But it would all be a lie. To compel her love is to rob that love of all that would give it meaning. Ultimate power gives you the ability to take anything. But what he craves could only be freely given, and it's being withheld. He has become a supreme being, and as he notes, it's a hollow victory. But as noted, Thanos required that the Silver Surfer not interfere with his plans. So he didn't just fake his own death. He had something else in mind to keep him from getting underfoot during all of this. We pick that up in Silver Surfer 40, where Surfer turns over the body from that conduit to Mentor, while Eros and Drax are present. But Drax keeps insisting that it's not Thanos, that Thanos is still out there. So off he goes. Mentor disregards this, disparaging the limitations of this incarnation compared to the last Drax, and that there's no reason not to assume that things are as they appear to be. The Surfer, satisfied, flies off, only to receive a summons from a place called Dynamo City, where Thanos had become a citizen before his death. As a citizen, his death must be investigated, and while the Surfer has no interest, the fact that he is mentioned in Thanos' last will and testament piques his curiosity, and so consents to attend the court case. Dynamo City is an enormous spatial construct, and as the Surfer learns to his horror, also confiscates energy sources from those who come, which means he is robbed of his power cosmic. He's fortunately found not guilty of murdering Thanos, but as Thanos' will states, he has gone to the trouble to punish the Surfer for killing him. See, the Surfer cannot exit until he pays the exit tax, which is 50 credits, and he, of course, has no credits whatsoever. and no power cosmic, and no way to get past the guards to get into space and get his powers back. Which means, as issue 41 shows, he has to get a job. In the spirit of his Warlock days, Starland takes the opportunity to satirize society with this bureaucracy to the nth degree. I should note that Ron Mars had been brought into Marvel by Starland and did the actual writing of this storyline. But the storyline of Dynamo City was definitely Starland's. It was a way to help Mars build up some cred within Marvel, so that eventually he could take over the Silver Surfer book. We'll skip over the details of this storyline for our purposes. Surfer is destitute, living in a shanty town, and gets a visit from Drax. Drax says he's got proof now that Thanos is alive, and Surfer is very interested in seeing it. So, Drax quickly leaves to bring him to it, but doesn't bring the Surfer with him. It's not until the Surfer is sentenced to execution via ejection into space that he's able to escape and return to learn about Thanos' deception. In issue 44, the Surfer learns that the corpse that he recovered isn't Thanos. The real one is, in fact, playing with his newfound godhood. Since the gems are normally worn on the brow, and there would be too many, Thanos has instead inserted them into his left glove. There's nothing particularly special about the glove, it's just a convenient way to hold them. But this, of course, has now created the famous Infinity Gauntlet, and with it, Thanos' will is all that there is. Case in point, dealing with the Silver Surfer to ensure that he can't interfere. He also decides to deal with Drax, even though he seems a shadow of his former self. Both are summoned, and for the sake of those that hadn't read the miniseries, Thanos, page by page, shows what each of the 6 gems can do, and after that, uses the Soul Gem to deal with them for good. In issue 45, Thanos is watched by someone who has been drawn to his newfound omnipotence, Mephisto, who has actually been a long-time enemy of the Silver Surfer. But then again, that probably should be obvious. It's that old archetypal conflict between the devil and a naked man from space. As he considers, Thanos returns to his flagship, wanting an enormous armada to be gathered to serve as his personal ceremonial guard, and conjures riches to keep the various hooligans sated. But he senses a stowaway and learns that Nebula survived her immolation, though barely, and is on the cusp of death, her mind broken. Amused and pleased at her condition, Thanos has her locked into this twisted, hellish state on the cusp between life and death. She is, after all, a representation of his view of existence, that death is the release of suffering, and allowing her to live is a cruelty. Mephisto arrives now to explain his own connection to the Infinity Gems, that the being who begat the gems first created Mephisto and his kin, not conceiving of good or evil, and so, when they turned out to be right bastards, destroyed them. The being's suicide restored their existence, though they did not know of the true power of the gems. Of course, all of that comes from the Prince of Lies, so you can take that with a grain of salt. Mephisto says that he wishes to be Thanos' supplicant, and offers to show in entirely new ways that he can use the power of the gems. For example, to combine the mind, soul, and power gems to touch every mind in the universe, to be one with them. This is now within Thanos' power, and he undergoes this incredible experience, except going through that leaves his body unattended, and Mephisto can easily slip the gauntlet away for himself. Except Thanos reverse Unos him, tricking the trickster, so his treachery achieves nothing but strangulation. Mephisto pleads to be his acolyte anyway, to be his advisor, and Thanos, seeing Mephisto as no real threat, deigns to keep him around. Issue 46's cover says it all. Warlock and his entourage, after 12 years of absence from the Marvel Universe, are now about to rejoin it. As the Surfer and Drax are pulled into Soul World, where all that the Soul Gem devoured have been sent. In this place of true harmony, where the sins of the past are left behind and only the universal family are all that matters, Judge Krator welcomes them, and promptly gets punched in the face by Drax. Drax can sense Thanos everywhere. That's driving him nuts. But the reason why he does is because he's sitting on the back of Thanos' hand right now, and concludes the only way to get back to Thanos in order to destroy him is to first destroy this world. And the Surfer can't stop him, as he doesn't have the power cosmic here. But he does get filled in on things by Gamora and Pip, along with another point. As I mentioned previously, while Starland used the stars of their books to explore Thanos, he still ensured that the unique aspects of each character were also given justice. Captain Marvel faced the futility of being a warrior now and became something more. Warlock saw the frivolity of his Messiah complex and embarked on a path to an inevitable and empty end in order to undo his own potential crimes. And now with the Surfer, he's exploring the fact that when Galactus remade him from Norrin Radd to be his herald, it wasn't just a remaking in body. His soul has been tampered with. The others can sense this in him, but we're going to leave that to the side for right now. Warlock is clearly the only one who can sort out Drax, although Gamora keeps him busy for now, making sure that he's too distracted to think of a way to actually carry out his goal. She finally refers back to the incident when Drax smashed up her ship looking for Thanos and sees this as a little bit of payback. Meanwhile, Warlock is dramatically revealed, and after discussing things, leaps off and returns as a warrior, leading to issue 47, where he confronts and defeats Drax. And using all that he has learned, all the ways he has bonded with Soul World, he can open a way for them to return to their bodies. And knowing that Thanos will sooner or later realize of Soul World's existence and twist it to his own dark whims, agrees that they will have to take up the fight against him as well in time. Thanos and Mephisto are aware of the Surfer and Drax returning to life, although not the how of it. And it leads to a small, but I feel important moment. Mephisto taunts the Surfer about Thanos' plans, and the exchange over that act is this: "He is an old enemy of mine, and I wish to cause him distress and anxiety." I see. How petty. Thanos isn't above the desire to make his enemies bear witness to his triumph, but Mephisto's villainous taunting is nothing but childishness to him. One is to be acknowledged as a victor, the other is simply a hollow act of spite. Understanding the complexity of Thanos is not easy. In Quasar at this time, an event was taking place called Cosmos in Collision, where the villainous Maelstrom has attained incredible power for himself and plots to work with Oblivion for ultimate annihilation. But first, like some wow-bagger the infinitely prolonged who didn't get the joke, he seems insistent on going around to every incredibly powerful being there is for pretty much no other reason than to insult them. As Thanos previously expressed, how petty. Then again, to show the first sign of how poorly Thanos' character was grasped here, not only does the insult drive Thanos, who remember took a blast of the power cosmic to the face and responded only with mild annoyance, Thanos goes into a rage and responds with raw power. He also claims that God is all that there is and that it's he now, even though he's already mused that the power he's gained is beyond godhood. The reaction here shows him as a simpleton on par with the champion that he's gotten the power gem from. In contrast, rather than mocking Galactus as Maelstrom did, when Thanos goes to see Galactus, is to impress upon him the importance of not opposing him in the future. When Galactus is defiant, Thanos reveals his power, not through some kind of huge impressive blast. On the contrary, he simply makes the planet that Galactus was about to consume cease to exist. See, the danger of Thanos having the Infinity Gauntlet is not that he will use it like a club, because we've already seen what happens when he uses it like a club. And it seems that, if anything, he's embarrassed at that fact. He had ultimate power in his hands and was using it to eliminate stars one by one. How small. Having learned of how much more the Infinity Gems are, Thanos is working to untap more and more of the potential that they represent. That is the true danger that Thanos represents, that gaining such mastery of the cosmos is merely the beginning of his journey. Where will it take him? and what his ambitions will then become, that is absolutely terrifying.